friends, it's Unicorn, and today I want to talk about my favorite non-fictions of 2023. And I have 8 books here, just because I feel like I have talked about the memoirs I read last year so much on my channel, so I only picked one of them to be my favorite. But if you want to see some mesmerizing memoirs that I loved and recommend, I'll link a link specifically for it down below in the description. So I'll talk about the 7 general nonfiction in alphabetical order and talk about the memoir that I loved the most in the end. And without further ado, let's dive in. The first book is An Afro-Indigenous History of the United States by Kel T. Mace. I picked this book up in the library in the first half of the year, but I didn't see a lot of people talking about it on BookTube. I learned so much from it, and I just want to raise the attention just a little bit. And as the title suggested, this book Mace talked about the history of America from a Afro-Indigenous historian point of view, reviewing the fundamentals of the country, how it was rooted in colonialism, and passing down the oppression to non-white folks, especially for Black people and also Indigenous people. He explored the way how Black people and Indigenous people resisted over the years in history, making links and connections between the two ethnicity groups and showing how people fought in order to uproot white supremacy. This book pretty much covered a blind spot of mine, and it's very eye-opening and thought-provoking. I feel like it provided me a new angle to look at the history and current affairs, especially in America, but also in other countries. I appreciate the honest critiques that Mace had when talking about how intersectionally people can hurt each other while fighting for their rights. This was not an easy read. I remember I went through it pretty slow, partly because I'm not familiar with this part of the history, partly because it's a very dense nonfiction and it has so many facts and events that I want to remember, but I'm glad I read it and really recommend it if you want a refreshing perspective of learning about American history. And I didn't know this before today, but this book is actually a collection, part of a collection called Revisioning American History. They have other books like Revisioned Queer History, Disability History, and Independent Indigenous Peoples History, Latinx History, and Black Women's History, which all of them sounds worth reading and learning from. Next, we have Hidden Valley Road, Inside the Mind of an American Family by Robert Kolker. This is a fantastic reporting about mental health industry and schizophrenia that centered around a case study of the Galvin family, which had 12 children, 10 boys and 2 girls, and 6 of the boys were diagnosed with schizophrenia. The Galvin family became one of the first families to be studied by the National Institute of Mental Health in America and provided valuable lens for us to look into the world of science. In the part where this book talks about the story of the Galvin family, we can clearly see the author did large amount of research and interviews, which presented a full picture of the family's history, and us readers were able to grasp the struggles of the family, especially when they needed help because of the members are suffering from mental health issues, but without any additional help from outside. And I liked how this book challenged our perceptions on mental health, questioning that the way that society or Medicare industry are the way that they help people with mental health struggles are really helping, or are we just minimizing the symptoms to make it easier for us to erase or ignore their struggle? And I also appreciate the part about the history of mental health industry. And I like that the book presented the struggle that the scientists needed to go through if they wanted to study a topic that is not as profitable but important. In part, the book also reveals the hypocrisies in the profit-driven Medicare study and business model. Overall, I learned a lot about not only schizophrenia but also the industry in general, and I recommend this book if you like similar topics. And I have How Fascism Works, The Politics of Us and Them by Stanley. This book is about, well, how fascism works. Dissected fascism into 10 different pillars and discussing how it was born from essentially a non-existent nostalgic myth to various of ideologies, and stated a democratic nation doesn't need to become total fascist to suffer from fascism. Instead, the transition could be very subtle and starting from creating concepts like two nations, for example. This book helped me to understand where some absurd beliefs theories and conspiracy theories came from. And I was startled by how close some of the fascism ideologies are to us in our day-to-day life. Here I'm not talking about some very obvious, very problematic ideas. They are just in our life in the form of like stereotype reinforcement, widespread ignorance, and the narrative switching in news and stories, and a lot more. And it's a reminder for us to see how easy we fell into such narratives. I think this book is a very good systematic review of the concept of fascism. It's a very important read for us, especially for people who are born into the democratic country who may not have the first-hand experience of fighting for rights and basic surviving needs, for taking democracy as granted. History has an eye on us, but we may not have a clear memory of history. And that's why I feel like books like this are very, very important for us to read now. Following, we have Opinions, A Decade of Arguments, Criticism, and Minding Other People's Business by Roxane Gay. What an uplifting essay collection. Roxane Gay is an activist who I highly respect and like. This book is an essay collection of hers that covers her works in the past 10 years, from before the 2016 US election to nowadays when we were well into the pandemic. Just like her other collections, this book covers a variety of civil movements and talks about topics like identity, Black Lives Matter, women's rights, civil responsibilities, cultures, and a lot more. So many things has changed in the past 10 years where this book covered, so you can imagine the topics and tones of these essays jump in a very wide range as well. But I loved no matter how critical the situations could be, Roxane Gay was able to leave us some uplifting notes. And her suggestion to one of her readers who wrote to her about the lost in political activism stayed with me even ever since I read this book. Gay suggested that maybe we can choose one issue that we care about and want to work on the most, and applying genuinely effort and attention to it. So in that way, we're like actually contribute to something useful instead of chasing the next hot topic every day. I think this suggestion is practical and encouraging. In general, I enjoyed this book and liked reviewing the events in the past 10 years along with Roxane Gay. So although I didn't care about the middle part where she was talking about some celebrities and doing celebrity portraits too much, I still love and recommend this book. Next book is another very well received nonfiction, and I am just here to say that I love it too. It is Empire of Pain, The Secret History of the Sackler Dynasty by Radden Keefe. This book is a deep dive into the Sackler family, which has become a notorious name in the medical history, not only because they are one of the richest families in the world and made generous donations to various of museums and universities, but also because the Sackler family almost single-handedly caused and promoted the opioid epidemic in America. This book tackled on the history of the Sackler family from before they made a fortune and was just a family that studied medicine and that with half good wills and half ambitions, to when they cruelly turned into profit-driven machines when they discovered that the painkiller that they developed can make people addicted. The book also showed us a variety of methods that Sackler family used to promote the drugs to target more clients without a single thought of the patient's needs and health in mind. And also how so many innocent people became prey to false promoting so easily. Like Hidden Valley Road, this book wasn't only talking about the Sackler family, but provided us insights into pharmaceutical industry and examines how the system is driven by capitalism and the negative impact on people's health. The next book is also health related, but it's about mental health, or more precisely, how we perceive mental health. It's Strangers to Ourselves, Unsettled Minds and the Story That Make Us by Rachel Aviv. This is a fascinating book and a case study. Aviv started the book strongly by sharing her personal stories diagnosed with anorexia at the age of 6 when she had no idea about the common causes like diet culture and such. She then moved on to talk about the individuals with different mental health status, and I loved how this book challenged us to understand mental health differently. The great question this book raised is, how does the narrative that we construct about mental health influence our understanding of others and their experience in the world. And I also loved the writing of this book. It's full of compassion and understanding, presenting cases to us from different places and cultures, and really inspire us to think more about how we understand mental health. Before we move on to the final memoir, I do want to talk about an honorable mention of the year in the general nonfiction genre, which is Politics is for Power: How to Move Beyond Political Hobbyism, Take Action, and Make Real Change by Eitan D. Hersh. The reason why this book is an honorable mention instead of an actual favorite is that I feel like the suggestions the author made in the second half of the book are not very practical and came from a place of privilege without reflection. But before addressing that, this book is talking about a concept called political hobbyist, and it means that people who like to be informed with politics follow the news intensively and post online about their outrages and feelings, which sometimes cause harm and only reward politicians who cater to them. So that the author urges us to step forward from treating politics as a form of entertainment and suggests us to take part in local communities and organizations and actually doing physical things versus only addressing our opinions online. All of these I resonate a lot with, and I do think that the concept of political hobbyism is very interesting and something that we all need to be aware of and self-reflect on. And as people who care about politics, we all need to be cautious to not fall into the range of political hobbyism and remember to not only voicing our voices but also acting our acts. However, I expected more actionable suggestions from this book because the subtitle just starts with how to. Like I said, I don't think the conclusions or suggestions of this book are very actionable. For example, it talks a lot about how we, instead of spending an hour online reading and reacting to news, we should spend that hour go out and volunteering, which to me is like the author doesn't really understand how most people don't have a whole chunk of an hour every day. The hour that people spend online is accumulated from different breaks. So I feel like the action part of this book only speaks to a very small group of audiences who has time, resource, and can afford the energy to actually do the thing that he suggested, instead of speaking to most of us who spend our time online cumulatively. So that makes this book not a favorite, but I do think it's a good review of how we spend our energies consuming and responding to policies, and also think about the tiny actions that we can do to participate in it. And enough about that, let's move on to the memoir that I liked the most in this year. Among all the amazing memoirs that I read last year, I picked this one as part of my favorite. Is The Opposite Side of Butterfly Hunting by Evanna Lynch. This book is just extraordinarily beautiful, both the writing and also the messaging. I'm sure if you have stuck around on this channel for a while, you have heard me talking about it so many times, but I'm gonna talk about it again today. So this is Evanna Lynch's memoir talking about her experience growing up and recovering from anorexia. She talks candidly about her struggles and shared her reflections along the way. This is one of the books that I felt like captured mental health challenges precisely, but also did it in such a sensible way. It shows you the nature of struggles, but also leads you to understand yourself more. And I really appreciate how open she talked about how sometimes stories of recovering from anorexia can be added fuel to people who suffering from anorexia, and decided to not to talk about any specific numbers or things like that. I feel like she really had readers in mind when writing this book and constantly trying to provide tools to people and help readers who might have similar experiences. And again, I cannot stress how good this writing is in this book anymore. This is purely beautiful. I don't have other word for it. Please read it. And there you have it. That's my favorite nonfictions of 2023. I'm so happy that we wrapped it up 2 days before February. I'm a little proud of myself and also proud of you guys for sticking around with me. Please let me know what is the one nonfiction that you cannot forget after you read it. And as usual, don't forget to say hi in the comment section down below. I wish you happy reading, stay healthy, stay safe. I'll see you in my next bookish video. Take care.